Wrestling fans, we are all staying inside at the moment. What better time to read another Observer? December 2, 1991 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Steroid testing scam. Legal battle for FLAIR'S belt, more. By Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. 2 weeks after steroid testing, here is the scam. Either A are a lot of wrestlers who are ignoring the warnings by WWF management and are about to be suspended because they haven't discontinued steroid use. B, an awful lot of wrestlers are confident that they've already figured out ways to beat the test. C, an awful lot of wrestlers know the dates of the tests ahead of time that are said to be random and unannounced and plan their steroid programs accordingly, or believe strongly they won't be tested again anytime soon. D, some aspect of the steroid program and testing procedure is a sham and a solid percentage know it. Either the testing itself isn't legit, or it won't happen again, or people know that if they fail the test there really is no threat of suspension. E, steroid testing is so ridiculously easy to beat that it isn't even worth having in any sport except as public relations to answer the media and the marks and pretend nobody is using them. F, growth hormone, which is undetectable in steroid tests, usage or advanced steroid use, so-called designer drugs that can beat a test, among pro wrestlers is far more prevalent than we had thought. G, some wrestlers in the WWF are so genetically gifted that they are able to be bigger monsters without taking steroids despite a taxing and never-ending travel schedule that wreaks havoc with workouts and a life on the road eating at restaurants lifestyle that wreaks havoc with diet and other top-level athletes, pro wrestlers and other organizations and weightlifters who do take steroids, train consistently and eat right. Let's look at those options one by one. A, while there may be some wrestlers so psychologically addicted to their size or some with outside forms of incomes that they just don't care, Legion of Doom, for example, with part interest in the thriving Zubaz clothing line and the option to earn big money in Japan at any time, the vast majority need the steady work and aren't going to risk losing 6 weeks of paychecks. They have mortgages and families, too, over it. So I could see this with a small percentage, but not with as large a percentage as there is. Strike this one. V, it's awfully quick to have been able to pull this off, particularly if the timing and procedures are being kept confidential from the wrestlers, short of a connection with a growth hormone lab.
C, D, E and F, one or all of these are at least logical answers.
G, this is the viewpoint the WWF wants you to believe, but obviously this isn't the case. The point of all this is that despite what the WWF has said, nothing has changed, as probably is obvious to those of you who have already seen the Survivor series before reading this issue. It certainly appeared that not only are those who appear to be the heaviest users still looking the same. Some who looked to be smaller or a little flabbier last week had regained some of their size and tightened up by this weekend. So something certainly is fishy, and it certainly shows a lot of what was written here last week regarding the wrestlers' reaction to the policy to either be completely inaccurate or a minority viewpoint. That is, unless the WWF is going to suspend a significant percentage of the wrestlers after the first test that counts, and I think we all realize that isn't going to happen, which may be because the tests are ridiculously easy to beat rather than because they are going to ignore those that test positive, but only their hairdresser knows for sure because almost all information regarding testing policy and procedures is being kept confidential. So the never-ending story will indeed be never-ending. The one thing that has come out of this is the WWF has managed to change the story from allegations of it having a steroid problem to the story being steroid testing. Media stories alleging steroid use among pro wrestlers are pretty easy to write, given evidence like arrests and trials involving wrestlers with steroids. A story that there is some aspect of a sham involved in a testing procedure would be next to impossible to prove. A few years ago, there was a report on Washington, D.C., television station WJLA which alleged that 3 starting quarterbacks, among many players, had failed the NFL's cocaine test, but the league ignored the test results and they were never suspended. This report came just prior to a Super Bowl. The league vehemently denied it. The vast majority of the press fell into line. The reporters ended up winning journalism awards for the piece, and now it is generally acknowledged the reporters involved did an excellent job and the story was basically truthful. A story that the tests are far too easy to beat, if that's the case, would open up to the marks a problem, because if it's the case, then forget about pro wrestling. What does that say about the Olympic Games? Well, Jim Cornette's joke after the 1988 Olympics about Ben Johnson being caught for steroids while Florence Griffith Joyner needed a shave worse than Bruce Willis was understood by every wrestler in the business, the average consumer that grew up in an age where steroid use was limited to the top-class athletes, doesn't really realize the deeper message to all of this. Right now it would be difficult to do a pro wrestling steroid piece, because of all the aspects that would need to be brought up, because one would have to go into methods of beating the test that are hardly limited to pro wrestlers. in a 45 seconds television piece or even in a 12-inch newspaper article. And doing the piece fairly, one would have to bring up that unless the entire test in this case is a sham, that what does this mean as it relates to the more important sports? WCW made the full 180-degree turn from the July Bash, one of the worst major shows in recent history, to a clear-cut winner on November 19th in Savannah, Georgia. The Clash show was enough to make a lot of people see some light at the end of the 3-year-long tunnel that for a long time seemed to be going nowhere, that has been WCW under the Turner regime. Clearly, since hitting rock bottom, the organization has made some definite improvements, particularly on the talent side. The addition of Rick Steamboat, who debuted Tuesday at the Clash, was just the latest in a series of additions and changes that have reversed the company's direction. If Tuesday was any indication, Steamboat is clearly ready to break out of the pack and regain the form that made many feel he was the best wrestler in the world for the first half of 1989. If nothing else, the tag team title feud, which starts Thanksgiving night at the Omni in Atlanta, with Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes defending the WCW tag team titles against Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton, should provide the hottest matches on a consistent basis that this country has seen in quite a while. Hot matches aren't what this business is about in 1991, but the combination of returns of Steamboat, Abdullah the Butcher and Cactus Jack, with Paul E. dangerously being recast as a manager and Rick Rude coming in as a top singles, he'll have started the face-lifting process WCW has so badly needed. TV ratings have made a comeback to the point WCW is consistently outrating the WWF on cable, reversing a trend where the WWF had dominated the cable ratings all summer. Part of the ratings resurgence is no doubt attributed to the newcomers, but even more so, the important November sweep saw WCW both on cable and in syndication come through with consistently good matches, and a few great matches. There seems to be a correlation between several weeks of consistent top-notch matches and eventual increases in ratings points, although some would argue that giving away too many good matches for free on television hurts live attendance, a point which may be valid in this case, but there are numerous examples both in this country and foreign countries that contradict that theory, since the last time WCW's ratings were beating this level was during the fall/winter of 1989-90, at which point they were concentrating on putting good matches on television. But these hot television shows are just step one of a long process, and anyone who thinks the Clash was the climax of the process rather than simply step one should be sobered by the crowds at the house shows since the Clash, 325 in Richmond, 1,000 in Philadelphia and 800 in Washington, D.C. This is with all the new additions, except for Steamboat, and all the new feuds. But the Clash itself drew a 4.3 rating, which translates into 2,460,000 homes, which is the best rating since the Black Scorpion Clash 1 year ago. Interestingly enough, unlike almost every previous Clash, the rating didn't peak during the main event. The audience peaked with the Steamboat and Rhodes vs. Enforcers tag team title match, which drew a 4.7 rating or 2,706,000 homes, then actually fell off significantly during the Brian Pillman vs. Johnny B. Bad match for some reason, came back to a 4.7, 2,704,000 homes, for Rude vs. Sting before dropping to a 4.5 for the Luger-Steiner match. 1. Big Josh pinned Thomas Rich in 6:03 in a lumberjack match. The Young Pistols, who had yet to turn on television, acted as heel lumberjacks and worked over Josh when he was out of the ring. Finish saw lumberjack Terrence Taylor intentionally trip Rich as he was coming off the ropes and Josh pinned him with a butt drop. Both guys worked pretty hard and it was a decent start to the show. 1 3/4 stars. 2. Bobby Eaton pinned Chip the Firebreaker in 4:52. Chip opened by trying a high spot which, as it turns out, was messed up to the point it won this match worst match honors in the poll. Eaton picked things up in the last 90 seconds doing some solid finishing moves and they traded near falls. Finish saw Chip do a rolling reverse cradle. Eaton kicked him off with his legs and Chip ran into the turnbuckles. As he rebounded off, Eaton caught him with a back suplex and a bridge for the pin. 1 1/4 stars. Next came what is becoming a regular angle on each Clash, where a main event babyface gets beaten up earlier in the show and then makes a gallant effort later in the show, only to lose. This was done to a greater extreme than any thus far, since it was with Sting. Sting came out and they were going to find out who has been sending the dreaded boxes. Anyway, a bunch of prelim wrestlers pretending to be bodybuilders, and a few bodybuilders pretending to be wrestlers as well, carried in a large cabin. Out came Medusa, in a costume straight from the set of the Last I Dream of Jeannie remake. Medusa came out, got on her knees, luckily I have no idea what they were trying to symbolize, was pawing at Sting for a while and otherwise distracting him to allow Lex Luger to then jump out of the cabin and clip Sting from behind. Lex grabbed the wrong leg to work on. He should be forgiven, all the Lucha Libre experience made Lex inadvertently grab the right leg, and Sting had to practically tell him to switch legs, which he did. Actually, this was part 1 of a pretty unique angle. 3. Tom Zenk pinned Diamond Stud in 124 with a crucifix. After the match, Stud beat up Zenk and gave him the Diamond Death Drop and left him laying. Most of this match was only on half the screen as they were showing Sting going out in an ambulance to the nearest medical facility with Bobby Eaton telling him he has plenty of time, which was a very subtle way of starting the Eaton turn. The action in the match was really fast-paced with good chemistry, but nobody noticed and it was over before you could blink. 1 1/2 star. 4. Steve Austin pinned PN News to retain the WCW TV title in 421. Lady Blossom came out in her final appearance with an outfit that covered her up. I guess they wanted to make sure she didn't make an impression on her last TV. Pretty hot pacing. A few sloppy spots and a few good spots, but the biggest negative when News tried a dropkick and didn't get 1 foot off the ground. News hit the belly to belly, but Blossom put Austin's leg on the ropes before the 3 count. News chased Blossom and Austin dove over the top rope onto News, who crashed into the guardrail. News got back in the ring and went for a splash into the corner. Austin moved, News hit the buckles and Austin pinned him with his feet on the ropes. 2 1/4 stars. 5. Cactus Jack pinned Van Hammer in 403. The announcers were pushing Van Hammer as something slightly bigger than Hulk Hogan, and they did a nice television entrance where they interspersed his video with his actual entrance, but while Jim Ross was screaming about how crazy the crowd was going, the reaction was lukewarm, and once the match started, the reaction died. Still, this was a better than average match, and while it was mainly due to Cactus, it was Hammer's best performance thus far. Cactus did an elbow off the middle rope to the floor. The two worked surprisingly well together, particularly in both tumbling over the top on a clothesline. Cactus kicked out of a knee drop from the top rope. After a collision, Jack hit Hammer with his own guitar and got the pie on. After the match, Hammer gave Jack a shoulder block and slingshot suplex onto the ramp, and they brawled to the back. Only during the post-match brawling did Hammer look pretty bad. 2 1/4 stars. At this point they went to a phone interview with Eric Bischoff on location with Sting at the Parts Unknown Medical Center. Luckily Sting's knee wasn't going to require reconstructive surgery. 6. Ricky Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes captured the WCW Tag Team titles from Arnold Anderson and Larry Zbyszko in 1448 of one of the best U.S. matches of 1991. Barry Windham came down in street clothes, with them airing a clip of the squash match where he actually was injured in weeks ago and then pretending the match just took place and that he re-injured his hand. They brought out a mystery partner wearing a dragon head and they got a huge reaction when the mask came off revealing Steamboat. Both Anderson and Zbyszko sold it great. I believe this was the first time Steamboat and Anderson had ever worked together, and each's strengths as workers brings out the best in the other. Steamboat was almost like an artist out there. Steamboat was in for a 7-minute heat spot which should be aired at every wrestling school as how to work as a babyface in building the heat in a tag team match. After all sorts of hot moves and near tags, finally Rhodes made the hot tag. After Rhodes bulldogged Anderson, Steamboat pinned him with a flying body press off the top rope. In what came off as pretty sleazy on TV, they announced later that a protest had been filed and that the enforcers were claiming since Steamboat wasn't on the original contract that they should get the belts back. They teased that they've had a decision at the end of the show, but then went off the air telling people they'd have to call the 900 number to find out what the decision was. 4 1/4 stars. Next up was a tape of Jushin Liger, showing clips of matches with Pegasus Kid, both with and without the mask, and Akira Nagami. Originally Liger was going to appear live and be interviewed by Missy Hyatt, but they saved him a trip and Missy instead interviewed Mark Bagwell and Marcus Alexander Bagwell, clearly being pushed for the little girls. That obvious pushing of pretty boy babyfaces works against the faces in many parts of the country, and that name won't be much of a help either because male wrestling fans aren't going to like pretty boys to begin with, especially a preppy-looking pretty boy with a rich, snob name. Paul E. Dangerously then did a great interview talking about how the contract stated that if Sting didn't appear for the match that he'd forfeit the title to Rick Rude. 7. Brian Pillman retained the WCW Light Heavyweight title pinning Johnny B. Bad in 419. It had to be hard for these two to follow the previous match, but they did fine. They traded a lot of high-flying hot spots but just didn't have enough time to develop it into a great match. One nice spot saw Bad come off the top rope and be met with a dropkick by Pillman. Finish saw Bad hit Pillman with the knockout punch, but Teddy Long had the ref distracted so Pillman wasn't pinned. As Bad argued with Long, Pillman cradled him from behind. The actual cradle wasn't exactly textbook. After the match, Bad officially turned face by hitting Long with the punch. 2 1/2 stars. 8. Rick Rude pinned Sting in 450 to win the U.S. title. Rude and Dangerously were in the ring ready to be awarded the match via forfeit when Sting, who had hijacked an ambulance from parts unknown medical center back to the Savannah Civic Center, arrived just in the nick of time. It was pretty predictable, but almost too hokey, although this was probably the best job they've done in getting Sting over as a face since the Horseman turned on him in early 1990. Sting sold the knee all the way but made a few comebacks and even kicked out once from a telephone shot. After Sting hit a DDT, he went after dangerously. Rude clipped his knee from behind and pinned him holding the trunks. After all that work on giving Sting an excuse to lose between the pre-match attack and constant working on the knee, they should have done a stronger finish. It was very intense for such a short match. 3 stars. 9. Lex Luger pinned Rick Steiner in 11:30 to retain the WCW title. After all that everyone had seen, these guys were in a bad spot. Crowd wasn't into it and Luger just didn't seem right. He came into the match with a fat lip and a black eye courtesy of a crossed-up high spot earlier in the week against Sting. The match just didn't have it until the end, when it turned into a 5-way with Mr. Hughes, Harley Race and Scott Steiner all involved. They didn't call for the DQ. Rick gave Luger a belly-to-belly superplex when all you know what broke loose. Scott hit the Frankensteiner on Hughes, Rick Steiner power-slammed Luger and then suplexed Race into the ring. While the ref was distracted, Luger hit Rick Steiner with the belt and pinned him. 2 1/4 stars. The card itself drew a sellout 6,922 fans, with fans turned away at the door. The actual paid attendance was between 4,000 and 5,000. The crowd heat was excellent in a lot of spots. It was most noticeable in the tag team title change and in the US title match, although the reaction wasn't particularly strong during the main event. An interesting backstage development regarding Ricky Steamboat took place at the show. Apparently the week before the show, WCW contacted the WWF and told them of their intention to use Steamboat at the Clash and requested that if the WWF believed they had any legal claim to Steamboat to please contact them by Friday. Steamboat had signed a 2-year contract with Titan Sports which expires around January 4, 1993, although one could certainly make a case that being fired should nullify the contract. Steamboat's attorneys had claimed Titan had violated the contract in 2 places, and that it should be voided. Anyway, less than an hour before showtime, Titan sent a fax to the WCW offices in Atlanta, when everyone of importance was already in Savannah for the Clash, claiming they had the legal rights to Steamboat. The word did reach the building before the show and Kip Fry, WCW legal counsel, met with Jim Herd and Jim Crockett and the decision was made to use Steamboat, who I believe signed a WCW contract, terms and length of which I'm not sure, although some reports are it was a 6-month deal. Anyway. The latest in the battle for the belt took place on Thursday in Charlotte. As many of you have seen on all the television shows, both in cable and syndication, that aired this past weekend, the clip of the angle where Undertaker and Ric Flair attack Hulk Hogan has had all visuals of the NWA World Title belt digitized. In court on Thursday, the WWF claimed to have contacted all top 30 market stations and asked them to digitize or somehow obstruct televising the NWA belt during that angle and during other portions of the show that the belt aired. As mentioned here last week, to the best of our knowledge, the belt was in full camera view in all of these markets anyway, after the WWF and NWA had reached a legal agreement that the belt wouldn't air in syndication over that weekend. The counsel for the NWA didn't dispute that the WWF made the best effort possible to remove the belt from syndication. The NWA then tried to get an injunction for this past weekend against not only the WWF, but also all its affiliates, against showing the belt on the shows that aired this past weekend. The WWF argued against the injunction, saying it would hurt their relations with their various affiliates and it would make their affiliates believe they had done something wrong when they believe they haven't done anything wrong. Anyway, after viewing more videos of Ric Flair with the belt, the judge denied the NWA's attempt to get a temporary restraining order. The judge ruled that he believed whatever damage had been done to the NWA was largely because the individual, Ric Flair, appeared on WWF telecasts, and not because the belt appeared on those telecasts. The reasonable facsimile issue wasn't brought up, however, as of this weekend. Flair was out with yet another different belt. This one I believe was an old WWF Tag Team title belt, since the WWF emblem was prominently on this belt, which kind of ruins the gimmick in some ways about it not being a legit championship belt, which looks nothing like the old NWA title belt. This case may be over, where the NWA could attempt to sue the WWF for damages, although in most cases, but not every case, if the restraining order is denied, it is generally considered as not worth going to trial over. All Japan Women promoted its biggest show of the year on November 21st in Kawasaki, the WrestleMarine Piad 3 show. I don't have too many details about the card other than they must have been intent on having some of the girls, in particular Bull Nakano, set an all-time endurance record. The scheduled main event was an old-style Texas death match inside a cage, continuing until both members of one team were unable to continue, with Nakano and Monster Ripper going against Asia Kong and Bison Kimura. The match lasted 45 minutes, ending with Kimura knocked out and unable to continue and Kong heavily juiced. After the match was over, Ripper, who brought her WWC Puerto Rico World Women's title belt with her, then attacked Nakano, who holds the WWA title. It wound up with the two agreeing to go back into the cage for a Texas death match to determine who the real champion was. This match went 33-23 and ended with Nakano winning via knockout after putting Ripper out with a sleeper hold. If it wasn't enough, there was yet another marathon technical wrestling match earlier in the show as Kyoko Inoue and Toshio Yamada returned from their tour of Mexico and beat Akira Hokuto and Manami Toyota. Inoue, Hokuto and Toyota are probably the three best technical wrestlers in the promotion, and Yamada isn't far behind, in 32:07. Other results from the show saw Takako Inoue retain the Japanese women's title pinning Debbie Malenko in a scant 13:11. Suzuka Minami and Seiki Hasegawa and Atsuko Mita beat Yumiko Hata and Mima Shimoda and Mariko Yoshida and Bat Yoshinaga and Tomoko Watanabe beat Koro Ito and Miori Kamiya. The AP on Monday night carried a story about a lawsuit filed in Fulton County, Georgia, Superior Court by Thomas McLeay, former NWA referee Tommy Young, concerning his career-ending injury. McLeay sued Thomas Richardson, wrestler Thomas Rich, and Center Stage in Atlanta for $25,000. In his lawsuit, McLeay said that the script for the match called for Rich to push the referee to divert his attention so that his opponent, Michael Wallstreet aka Mike Rotunda, could throw Rich out of the ring. Instead, there was a power failure in the building at the time Rich was going to push him. After being tripped and unable to see, McLeay whiplashed himself on the ring ropes, suffering serious spinal injuries. I was in Chicago over the weekend to see the Bears play and caught the WWF show at the Rosemont Horizon last night, November 24th. The crowd was a disappointing 8,000 paid 9,000 plus in the building, for a gate of $135,000. While by today's standards, any gate of more than $100,000 probably should be considered very good, the first Flair-Hogan match in a city where both men have track records of drawing some very good crowds had to be a disappointment. It's ironic, but every week Flair appears on WWF television hurts his drawing power that much more. In fact, I believe at least half of the total tickets sold were purchased in the first week tickets went on sale, which is unheard of by today's standards. The only reason they got off to such a hot start was because Flair was seen as the outsider, the same reason this feud got off the ground with such strong houses originally. He's no longer that. Doing the interviews with DiBiase, Mountie and Warlord took a big edge off his specialness, and the match is no longer anything special, although it's still drawing much bigger houses than anything else in US pro wrestling is doing right now. 1. El Matador, Tito Santana, pinned Colonel Mustafa with a sunset flip. Luckily I've managed to arrive late for this match 2 straight shows. This match looked better than the one last week in San Francisco. 2. Warlord pinned Greg Valentine in 11:25 when Valentine picked him up for a body slam, but Warlord fell on him for the pin. Warlord is huge. Mainly tests of strengths and beer hugs in between the stalling. I'm sure in the SWF, Snell Wrestling Federation, they put on faster-paced matches than this one. 1.5 star. 3. Bret Hart pinned the Mountie to retain the Intercontinental title. I wonder if all those fans who talk about what a great technical wrestler Hart is say so because they notice it from watching him wrestle or simply because it's said so often on television. This was much better than the previous bouts I've seen between the two. Mountie would do a big move and then scream "I am the Mountie" real loud instead of trying to win the title. Hart made a comeback, doing a few hot moves and gaining the pin with a flying clothesline off the top rope in 8:20. Mountie then used the zapper after the match and Hart dropped the belt onto the floor and a piece of the title belt flew off. 2.25 stars. 4. Ted DiBiase and IRS beat Big Boss Man and Virgil in 12:19. This was a very enjoyable match with all 4 working hard. DiBiase was clearly the star here, taking some great bumps, particularly out of the ring. Boss Man and IRS did their normal good high spots from their singles matches but eliminated the slowdown spots. They got heat on Boss Man for a while and Virgil made the hot tag. Finish saw DiBiase hold Virgil and Sherry went to hit Virgil with her shoe but Virgil ducked and it hit DiBiase. But before Virgil could pin DiBiase, IRS hit him with his briefcase and DiBiase pinned Virgil. 3.5 stars. 5. Nasty Boys beat Bushwhackers in 10:28 when Knobs pinned Butch after a clothesline. Mike Figueroa, who looks like Sky Lolo's little brother, was the ref, mainly stalling so the Bushwhackers could march around the ring. I've seen a lot worse from the Bushwhackers. 1/2 star. 6. British Bulldog pinned Barbarian at 8:49. I don't know why this is, But this is the second card in a row that I've seen Barbarian on where fans have started steroid chants and catcalls at him. If he's on them right now, and I've seen him look bigger and more pumped in the past, he's hardly the most obvious in the WWF. But the only wrestler I've seen get as many steroid catcalls is Hogan, and that was because of all the publicity that surrounded him. Anyway, Bulldog did more than usual, which still is very little. Barbarian went for a vertical suplex, but Bulldog turned it into an inside cradle. 1/2 star. 7. Hogan beat Flair via countout in 13:25. This match had a ton of heat. Most in the crowd thought it was the first time they'd ever wrestled. Flair clearly had his contingent, although there were maybe 20% of the crowd. The match was the same pattern as most of their meetings. It was a lot better than last week's match, which went half as long at SF, but still nowhere close to their Oakland match. Hogan sold very little aside from a groin shot into the ring post and chair shots on the knee. He reversed the figure 4 and made the Superman comeback, which was almost silly since he played Superman for the first several minutes. The two brawled out of the ring and Hogan slammed Flair's head into the steps and jumped in to beat the count. 3 stars. EMLL. November 22nd at Arena Mexico in Mexico City saw Blue Panther and Angel Blanco Jr. and Pierroth Jr. beat Love Machine, Art Barr, and Black Magic and Mascara Sagrada via DQ1 Machine Unmasked Panther in 15:54 2.5 stars. The Ultimate Dragon, Yoshihiro Asai, finally debuted on Galavision teaming with El Hijo del Santo and Misterioso, a team of a Japanese wrestler, a Mexican Idol and an American, to beat the hot heel trio of Fuerza Guerrera and Emilio Charles Jr. and La Fiera when Misterioso made Guerrera submit in the third fall in 1741. Was told that Santo, Dragon, Guerrera and Charles were all excellent in this match. Also interesting because of the cross-promotional nature of this, because Santo, world welterweight champ of the rival UWA, was in doing spots with Guerrera, world welterweight champ of the NWA. 3.5 stars. Conan and Dandy and Anibal beat Nitron and Cien Caras and Mascara Año 2013-29 when Anibal made Mascara Año 2000 submit 1/2 star. Anibal was awful, but Dandy and Conan were doing lots of Midnight Express moves, and in the finals of the CMLL World Trios title tournament, the new Infernales, Pirata Morgan and MS1 and Satanico became the first champs, beating Los Brazos 18:02 when Morgan pinned Brazo de Oro in the third fall. There were 5 consecutive dives out of the ring in the third fall. Even though both teams are heels, they both worked babyface style to get over the importance of the title belts. 2.25 stars. On TV they announced that Jerry Estrada would be going over to the December 12th Tokyo Egg Dome show as the MLL's representative. Estrada will wrestle Asai on the show, which may be a show stealer considering what the rest of the card is. Octagon kept the Mexican welterweight title, beating El Hijo del Gladiador on November 20th in Mexico City. November 17th at Arena Mexico saw the Mexico City debut of Ultimate Dragon teaming with Octagon and Santo to beat Guerrera and Sangre Chicana, and Charles when Dragon pinned Chicana with a moonsault body block. Interesting that in the first fall Santo did a job for Guerrera, with Guerrera using the famous Santo camel clutch. Semi-final saw Jacques Mate and Pierroth Jr. and Massacre go to a draw with the new Infernales. Arafat's debut has been delayed a few weeks as he's staying in northern Mexico working for promoter Raul Reyes, who some old-time fans may remember from his early 70s stint for both Mike LaBelle and Roy Shires in California. On November 24th at Arena Coliseo in Mexico City, former tag partner Satanico beat Massacre in a double juice match. November 6th in Acapulco saw Liz Mark keep the NWA light heavyweight title, beating Pirata Morgan, while the November 16th main event in Puebla saw Atlantis keep the NWA middleweight title, beating Sangre Chicana. UWA. For those of you with a satellite dish, the UWA television show airs on Imavision on one of the Mexican satellites every Saturday afternoon from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The show that aired on Saturday afternoon was headlined by a 30-minute match with Mil Mascaras vs. Kinect, and I believe the headline match on TV this week will be Villano 3 vs. Pegasus Kid Mask vs. Masked match that went 40 minutes, which ended with Pegasus being unmasked. The TV cards are loaded with Mexican name talent. Interesting that US fans will now be able to get each major promotion in Mexico City's top house show of the week on television now. November 17th at El Torreo in Naucalpan saw Ricky Santana and Miguelito Peris and Gigante Warrior beat Kinect and Fishman and Killer in a battle of heels when Peris pinned Kinect to win the third fall with his feet on the ropes. Peris also pinned Kinect to win the first fall to set up the Kinect vs. Peris match for the UWA World title, which took place this past Sunday at El Torreo. Also Tinieblas Jr. and Sr. and Villano 3 beat Danny Davis and Tony Anthony and Coquina, Enrique Vera and Silver King and El Texano beat El Signo and El Engendro and Negro Navarro. Super Pinocchio and Phantasma and Solar beat El Indomito and Kaho's Eye and Babyface Eye, and the Ninja Turtles won the opener, beating El Sismo and Rey Cobra and Los Moicanos Eye and 2. Negro Casas retained the UWA World Middleweight title on November 20th in Netzahualcoyot, beating Ruben Garcia. Casas is leaving for Japan in 2 weeks for a tour with New Japan. This past Friday night in Puebla had Coquina and Warrior and Peris versus Dos Cars, Hinieblas Jr. and Sr., and Viano 3 and Texano versus Davis and Anthony. November 24th at El Torreo in Naucalpan, saw Connect beat Peris to retain the UWA World title with a small package in the third fall of a match that went 30 minutes. Paris and Vera beat Coquina and Warrior via DQ when Coquina unmasked Cars to set up a singles feud between the two of them down the road. Anthony and Davis beat Viano 3 and Hamada. Hiller and Fishman and Dr. Wagner Jr. beat Silver King and Texano and Transformer in what was said to have been the best match on the card. Interesting, since Wagner and Silver King are brothers. Viano I and El Cicotalico, Mexico's answer to Junkyard Dog, and Phantasma beat Black Power and Cajos and Babyface, and the opener saw Scorpio Jr. and Senior team with El Engendro to beat Super Raton and Super Pinocchio and Celestial. The Headhunters from Puerto Rico, who work for Wing in Japan, are headed in during December. Mil Mascaras and El Hijo del Santo return to El Torreo in December. Rambo and Herides are touring France. Among the wrestlers scheduled to debut early in 1992 are Genaro Contreras Jr., the son of Ringo Mendoza, and Mil Mascaras Jr. The latter debut will no doubt gain a lot of attention. Got to feel sorry for anyone trying to work using that ring name, although El Hijo del Santo didn't do badly for himself, and El Santo was a bigger deal in Mexico than Mascaras. All Japan. The annual tag team tournament is drawing sellout crowds every night. As of Friday night, Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada were tied with Giant Baba and Andre the Giant, and with Abdullah the Butcher and Kimala 2 with 8 points, with Jumbo Tsuruta and Akira Tao right behind with 7 points. However, on November 21st in Osaka, during a tag match with Misawa and Kawada versus Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi, Misawa was elbowed in the eye by Kobashi and his eye was swollen shut, and he was out of action as of Saturday. Any date he misses that a tournament match is scheduled would result in a forfeit, which would take them out of the lead in a hurry. The tour opened on November 16th before a sellout 2,000 fans at Korakuen Hall for a television taping. See results in the TV rundown section. The card also drew a 6.1 video research rating, which during that time period, is something like a 60-plus audience share. The November 17th show drew a standing room crowd of 3,850 as Osamu Teranishi pinned Satoru Asako, Yoshinari Ogawa pinned Misao Inoue, Joel Deaton and Billy Black beat Sunny Beach and Johnny Ace in 7:09 when Deaton pinned Beach, Baba and Andre and Mitsuo Momoda beat Masafuchi and Motoshi Okuma and Haruka Eigen when Baba pinned Okuma, Abdullah the Butcher and Kimala 2 beat Rusher Kimura and Mighty Inoue, Steve Williams pinned Kikuchi in 12:30 with the Stampede, Terry Gordy pinned Kenta Kobashi with a powerbomb in 1907, Kawada pinned Dan Crawford with a powerbomb in 13:20, Misawa beat Doug Furness by submission with the facelock in 7:54, Tsuruta and Tao beat Dory Funk and Al Perez in 11:38 when Tao pinned Perez, and Stan Hansen and Dan Spivey beat Dynamite Kid and Johnny Smith in 9:37 when Hansen pinned Smith with the lariat. November 18th in Niigata drew 3,950 as Hansen and Spivey and Kid beat Williams and Gordy and Ace in 16:52 when Kid pinned Ace, Misawa and Kawada beat Butcher and Kinkimala 2, Tsuruta and Tao beat Black and Deaton, Baba and Andre beat Kobashi and Kikuchi, Funk and Perez beat Inoue and Kimura, Furness and Crawford beat Smith and Fuchi and Beach pinned Ogawa. November 20th in Okayama drew 3,050 as Hansen and Spivey and Kid beat Tsuruta and Tao and Ogawa and Kid pinned Ogawa, Misawa and Kawada beat Black and Deaton in 17:26 when Kawada pinned Black, Crawford and Furness beat Kobashi and Kikuchi in 20:06 in what was said to have been a super match. Abdullah and Kimala 2 beat Funk and Perez. Ace and Beach beat Kimura and Inoue and Andre, and Baba and Fuchi beat Williams and Gordy and Smith when Andre pinned Smith. November 21st in Osaka drew 6,400, tied this group's record crowd in Osaka, which has traditionally been a hardcore New Japan city, as Tsuruta and Tao went to a 30-minute draw with Gordy and Williams in the main event. Misawa and Kawada beat Kobashi and Kikuchi when Misawa pinned Kikuchi in 18:51. Hansen and Spivey beat Furness and Crawford when Spivey pinned Furness with the DDT. Andre and Baba beat Inoue and Kimura, Kimala and Abdullah beat Kid and Smith, Funk and Fuchi beat Black and Deaton, Perez pinned Ogawa and Beach, and Ace beat Misao Inoue and Teranishi. November 22nd in Takamatsu drew 3,200 as Williams and Gordy beat Kid and Smith in 17:29, Baba and Andre beat Tsuruta and Tao when Baba pinned Tao in 10:33, Crawford and Furness beat Inoue and Kimura, Hansen and Spivey beat Deaton and Black, Funk and Peris beat Kikuchi and Kobashi, Beach pinned Teranishi, Fuchi pinned Momoto and Abdullah and Kimala 2 beat Ogawa and Ace. New Japan. This group announced shows for television tapings on December 11 at Nagoya Rainbow Hall, 11,000 seats, and December 16 in Osaka for a live television special. The Nagoya lineup will be headlined by Riki Choshu and Masa Saito vs Shinya Hashimoto and Scott Norton, Keiji Muto and Hiroshi Hazi vs Bam Bam Bigelow and Tim Horner, Tatsumi Fujinami vs Tom Zank, Masa Chono vs Kim Duke, Norio Onaga vs Negro Casas for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title. Winner no doubt to lose the title to Jushin Liger at the Tokyo Dome on 1/4 closing parenthesis, and Super Strong Machine vs Masashi Aoyagi. The Osaka card has Muto and Hazi vs Norton and Hashimoto for the IWGP Tag Team titles, Tony Halme vs Bigelow, Casas vs Liger and Chono and Fujinami vs Choshu and Akira Nagami. November 11 drew 4,340 as Black Cat beat Mike Lazinski, Kunyaki Kobayashi pinned Scorpio, Aoyagi beat Kantaro Hoshino, Masa Saito and Osamu Kido, and Kengo Kimura beat Duke and Masanobu Kurisu and Hot Shot, Hiro Saito and Onaga beat Liger and Nagami, Fujinami and Shiro Koshinaka and Chono beat Machine and Bad News Allen and Mad Bull Buster Rex and Hashimoto and Norton won a non-title match beating Hazi and Muto in 15:33 when Hashimoto pinned Muto with the DDT. November 13 drew a sellout 2,760 as Koji Kanemoto pinned Lazinski, Kobayashi pinned Hot Shot, Kimura and Kido beat Hoshino and Kat, Koshinaka pinned Kurisu, Liger pinned Scorpio, Masa Saito and Hashimoto beat Allen and Duke, Onaga and Machine beat Fujinami and Nagami and Muto and Chono and Hazi beat Norton and Rex and Hiro Saito when Hazi pinned Rex. November 14 in Takayama drew a sellout 3,560 as Scorpio pinned Lazinski, Koshinaka and Kobayashi beat Michiyoshi Ohara and Kanemoto, Kido pinned Hoshino, Liger and Nagami beat Onaga and Hot Shot, Kimura and Hashimoto beat Duke and Kurisu, Chono and Hazi beat Allen and Rex, Masa Saito and Fujinami and Muto beat Hiro Saito and Norton and Machine. November 16 saw the tour end before a sellout 3,100 as Hoshino pinned Lazinski, Kimura pinned Hot Shot, Kido and Aoyagi beat Kobayashi and Kanemoto, Nagami pinned Scorpio, Koshinaka beat Kurisu via DQ, Masa Saito and Hashimoto beat Duke and Rex, Fujinami and Liger beat Hiro Saito and Onaga and Muto and Chono and Hazi beat Norton and Machine and Allen. FMW Tag Team Tournament opened on November 20 at the Furutsu Gym in Osaka before 4,855 fans. Atsushi Onita and Tarzan Goto beat Big Titan and the Gladiator, Mike Alfonso. In 10:39 the Soviet Judo team beat Katsuji Ueda and the Shooter, Ricky Fuji and Samba Asako beat the Mercenaries, Billy Anderson and Lou Fabiano, and the Sheik and Sabu beat Mark Starr and Horace Boulder in 1:12. That card was held the night before All Japan came into the same gym. The All Japan show had already sold out before Onita ran the card and it was well known about that. After Onita's match, he was attacked by the Sheik and after Sheik left him, he was in the ring bleeding and crying and instead of talking about Sheik, he said that this time his group lost its promotional battle over who would draw the most fans in Osaka to All Japan and he started crying and screamed that it would never happen again. November 21 in Kitachi drew 2014 as Onita and Goto beat Fuji and Asako, Titan and Gladiator beat Sheik and Sabu in 3:09. Sheik actually barely gets in the ring during these matches. November 24 in Tsuyama drew 1,834 as Onita and Goto beat Mercenaries and Gladiator and Titan beat Star and Boulder and Soviets beat Fuji and Asako and Shooter DDQ Sheik. Leon Spinks and another boxer from the US debut as a tag team on November 27. Also on this tour include an American woman boxer, a Soviet 400-pound woman judoka and Mexican midgets. Universal. They drew a sellout 1,500 on a spot show on November 11 which included Lightning Kid beating Sakayaki Gantetsu in 1:42 via countout, Rambo and Blue Demon Jr. and Canelo Casas beat El Hijo del Santo and Huracan Jr. and El Matematico and Casas pinned Matematico with the moonsault, El Texano and Silver King and Dr. Wagner Jr. beat Gran Amata and Monkey Magic Wakita and Masamichinoku in 2 straight falls. Punish and Crush and Kendo beat Scorpio Jr. and El Sismo and El Engendro and Michinoku pinned Kendo win a 17-man battle royal. Tour ended on November 14 before 1,950 fans at Korakuen Hall in Tokyo as Rambo and Demon beat Huracan and Matematico. Lightning Kid beat Gantetsu via core after pile driving him through a table. Sano beat Casas via submission to keep the UWA World Welterweight title in 1957. King and Texano and Wagner beat Hamada and Wakita and Michinoku in 2 out of 3 falls and Kendo and Punish and Crush beat Sismo and Scorpio and Engendro. Dos Caras is headed in during January. Japanese television rundown. October 20th All Japan Women. 1. Bull Nakano pinned Debbie Malenko in 5:31. Nakano caught Malenko in midair as she was coming off the top rope and in one move, turned it into a Northern Lights suplex and then was pinned with a side slam. Malenko has come a long way since she debuted in Japan in March. 3 stars, 2. Manami Toyota and Atsuko Mita went to a 30-minute draw with Bat Yoshinaga and Yumiko Hata as part of the tag team tournament. All action with lots of near falls at the end. Toyota was fantastic. At one point she tried to Asai moonsault off the top rope to the floor, but slipped on the top rope while doing the move and nearly killed herself falling to the floor on her hip. She then got back in the ring and started doing all her moonsaults and other high spots. 4 1/4 stars, 3. Mika Takahashi in her retirement match, pinned Miori Kamiya in 5 minutes with a superplex off the top rope. She sure saved her best for last because I've never seen her work so well. After the match, Asia Kong and Bison Kimura both attacked Takahashi, who then pinned Kimura and then Kong, which was kind of far-fetched. Takahashi cried a lot after the match was over. 3 1/2 stars, 4. Suzuka Minami won the All-Pacific title from Akira Hokuto. Minami has since lost the strap to Kimura. Just a display of suplexes, one after the other back and forth. Hokuto did a Jushin Liger leap off the top rope with a mid-air flip onto the floor. Minami gave Hokuto 3 power bombs, which she kicked out of, before pinning her after the 4th power bomb in 17:33. 4 stars, 5. Kong and Kimura won their tag team tournament match, beating Kyoko Inoue and Toshio Yamada in 18:08. Started out fast-paced with hot moves and stayed that way throughout. All kinds of hot moves. At one point Kimura threw Inoue into the seats and demolished most of an entire ringside section. Seeing that the entire section wasn't demolished, Kong threw Yamada into the few remaining standing chairs, so all of the ringside chairs were scattered. Kong gave Inoue a few back suplexes and she was pinned after a simultaneous karate punch by Kong and Kimura. 4 stars. November 17th, All Japan, 1. Abdullah the Butcher and Kimala 2 beat Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi in a tag team tournament match. Kobashi and Kikuchi did a new version of the rocket launcher with Kikuchi twisting in midair before splashing onto Kimala 2. 2 then busted Kikuchi's mouth open with a flying clothesline. Butcher pinned Kikuchi with an elbow drop. Only the finish aired, but it looked exciting, too. Terry Gordy and Steve Williams beat Dory Funk and Al Peris. Dory, who turns 50 in February, has trained himself into good shape for his age and reminds me of Pat O'Connor toward the latter stages of his career. Gordy pinned Peris with a clothesline. They also only showed the finish, but it looked good. 3. Giant Baba and Andre the Giant beat Billy Black and Joel Deaton when Andre pinned Black after what we can very generously call an elbow drop. This didn't look good, but Andre didn't look any worse than he has in the past few years. It may not be possible to be worse than that. 4. Jumbo Tsuruta and Akira Tao beat Dynamite Kid and Johnny Smith. Kid was really fired up and aggressive, even though he looks like a skinny midget, in reality like a normal average-sized man who doesn't take steroids but trains regularly and stays in good shape. But pro wrestling distorts normal values. Big Jumbo and Big Akira sold Big everything he did since he's a legend. Crowd went nuts during one sequence when Kid hit Tsuruta with something like 10 headbutts in a row. Of course Tsuruta pinned Smith with a back suplex. 3 stars, 5. Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada beat Stan Hansen and Danny Spivey. Hansen gave Misawa a killer back suplex at the bell. Hansen stiffed Kawada outside the ring with a chair. Kawada came back on Hansen with some ultra-stiff kicks. The first part of the match was excellent with Hansen really fired up. The middle portion saw Hansen and Spivey take turns with Boston Crabs on Kawada. Hansen also threw Misawa into the front row. Misawa ended up pinning Spivey with a splash off the top rope. 4 stars. USWA. November 18th at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis saw a tag team tournament with the winning team supposedly getting $100,000 and a trip to the Japanese tournament. Results saw Bill Dundee and Spirit of America, Randy Lewis, beat the Super Team, Jeff Gaylord and Big O, Billy Travis and Grave Digger, no idea, but being the Undertaker gimmick, beat Dutch Mantell and Brian Christopher. Tom Pritchard and Jimmy Valiant beat Eric Embry and Kimala when Pritchard pinned Kimala. Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Lawler beat Bart Sawyer and Doug Masters. Then Travis and Digger beat Dundee and Spirit. Lawler and Jarrett beat Valiant and Pritchard when Jarrett pinned Valiant, and in the championship match, Jarrett and Lawler beat Travis and Digger when Lawler pinned Travis. On television this past Saturday, Nate the Rat tried to use a butane lighter and a blowtorch to throw fire at Jarrett, but he was thwarted and Jarrett ended up throwing fire at Nate. Jarrett took a lot of time getting it done, but burned some of Nate's hair. They announced the main event for November 25th as a turkey match with Lawler and Spirit and Jarrett and Pritchard versus Embry and Tony Falk and Gravedigger and Kimala, and when Falk came out and asked what a turkey match was, they poured syrup all over him and feathers over his head and said that the loser comes out with feathers like a turkey. Several new gimmick wrestlers have shown up. The Candyman, the babyface who gives candy to all the kids at ringside, is Reggie B. Fine, doing the gimmick Brad Armstrong was supposed to do but never actually did. The young gun is a guy named Mike Mitchell, and already he and Robert Fuller are the USWA Tag Team Champions. Also in is the Sandman, who is from Philadelphia and is a Joel Goodhart wrestler, and the Black Cat, J.T. Smith from Philadelphia, who most say was Goodhart's best local wrestler. All of the newcomers seem to be getting pushes. Larry Sharp trainee Jimmy Dijewski, who worked New Jersey Indies as Jimmy Atlas, is scheduled to start next week doing an Ultimate Warrior gimmick. November 25th in Memphis saw Candyman beat Leatherface, Black Cat beat Falk, Sandman pinned Pritchard, Fuller and Young Gun won the USWA Tag Team titles from Masters and Sawyer, Jarrett beat Gravedigger, Embry beat Spirit of America in a match where the loser had to be put in a garbage can, Kimala pinned Lawler to win the USWA title, and Jarrett and Lawler and Pritchard and Spirit beat Embry and Digger and Kimala and Falk when Falk ended up in the feathers. GWF. The November 22nd card at the Dallas Sportatorium drew 700 fans. The first hour of taping, which airs December 16th on ESPN, saw Chaz pin Gary Scott, Black Bart beat Bull Payne via DQ when Samantha interfered, and the California Connection, John Tatum and Rod Price, became the new GWF Tag Team Champions. The champions were Chris Walker and Steve Simpson. Walker, who quit the promotion a few weeks back to join the WWF, was announced as having his plane delayed so he wouldn't be able to make it for the match. The plane was hijacked to Stamford, no doubt. So Marcos Villas, the GWF commissioner, told Simpson he would have to defend the belts himself or lose them. So Simpson went in a handicap match, and ended up being pinned after Price hit him with nunchucks. The second hour of taping, for December 23rd on ESPN, saw the Body Snatcher, another green guy doing an Undertaker gimmick, said to look like a smaller Bam Bam Bigelow, beat the Avenger, Jerry Lynn under a mask. Price and Sweet Daddy Falcone beat Bill Irwin and Rattlesnake with a strange finish. During the match, Falcone rolled out of the ring and claimed his knee went out. Tatum then jumped in and started teaming with Price, and the ref allowed it. When announcer Craig Johnson went to ask the ref told Johnson that the contract stated the coast-to-coast connection, and not to any two individuals, so he felt it was legal for Tatum to substitute. Johnson then asked if a contract was made out to the Wild Bunch, Bart, Irwin and Rattlesnake, could they do the same thing, and the ref said yes. So expect some kind of an angle to come out of that statement. Tatum ended up pinning Rattlesnake. Main event saw Simpson pin Tatum after Price accidentally hit Tatum with the nunchucks. The third hour, for syndication on December 14th and ESPN on December 18th, saw Gary Young pin Body Snatcher. The Davis brothers went to a double disqualification with Terry Garvin and Tug Taylor, and Bart beat Price via DQ when Tatum interfered. November 29th at the Sportatorium has the Patriot vs. Scott Anthony for the North American title. Tatum and Price defend the tag team titles against Simpson and mystery partner, Lightning Kid vs. Chaz for the light heavyweight title. Davis brothers vs. Garvin and Taylor in a cage match. Sam Houston vs. Bull Payne, Falcone vs. Irwin, Young vs. Barry Horowitz, and Chris Love is scheduled to debut the tag team of Bad Company, Chris Champion and Pat Tanaka, although supposedly Tanaka has no idea about any of this. There may be problems with the Patriot that aren't Titan related. Apparently Bill Eadie trademarked several of the gimmicks, and some Stranger, Patriot, etc., to Galaxy Corporation, Carol Lindsay and Danny Overstreet, who were the original money backers for GWF. And Galaxy Corporation and GWF are no longer the same thing. There are rumors Galaxy is still interested in staying in the wrestling business, in which case, they would claim ownership of the Patriot gimmick and character. Bill Neer is promoting a non-GWF show on December 7th at Riley High School in Dallas using mainly GWF talent, Irwin, Tatum, Chaz, Price, Young, Taylor, Falcone, and Skander Akbar. Here and there. In the Pro Wrestling Torch in the Obit 2 weeks back on Dick the Bruiser, it mentioned an incident where some little kids from an orphanage brought out a cake for Bob Ellis and Bruiser ruined the cake, and some of the kids cried and Ellis vowed revenge against Bruiser at the next house show. An interesting note that one of the kids doing that skit was an 11-year-old Tully Blanchard, whose father Joe worked in the office for the promotion at the time. Iqua on November 20th in Bradenton, Florida drew 22 fans as Kenny Kendall drew Rob Von Dama, Bugsy McGraw beat Canadian Bad Boy, Kevin Sullivan beat Hurricane Walker, Long Riders, Billy Mack and Tex Salinger, went to a no contest with the Terminator, Mark Laurinaitis, and Ricky Johnson to keep the Florida Tag Team titles, and Pat Tanaka beat Jimmy Backlund in a light heavyweight title match. Same group on November 21st in Tampa drew 190 as Van Damme drew Johnny Stewart, Sullivan beat Joe Pedrero, just destroying the guy outside the ring. Dick Slater beat Kendall Terminator and Johnson beat Long Riders to win the tag team titles, and Tanaka beat Backlund in a street fight bloodfest to keep the light heavyweight title. They have a show on Thanksgiving at the Tampa Sportatorium with Slater vs. Allen Iron Eagle and Long Riders, and Sullivan vs. Ron Slinker and Johnson and Tim Terminator. Maurice Mad Dog Vachon is suing the state of Iowa, claiming improper hospital care wound up with him amputating one of his legs after being hit by a drunk driver while jogging in 1987. Mark Lewin is running a Singapore/Malaysia tour in December using ex-WWF wrestlers and a few current WWF wrestlers that aren't getting regular bookings. Larry Sharp and Dennis Corralizzo have shows booked on January 10, 1992 at Bonner High School in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, headlined by Bob Backlund vs. Jerry Lawler, and January 11 in Clementon, New Jersey, headlined by Backlund vs. Dick Murdoch. November 23 in St. Petersburg drew 250 at Man Mountain. Brody beat Surgeon General via DQ in the main event. Surgeon General seems like an interesting heel gimmick. November 23 saw a Suncoast Pro Wrestling taping at the Manatee Civic Center in Palmetto, Florida before 300 fans. They announced the superstar Bob Cook as the new Suncoast Southern Heavyweight Champion, having won the title in a fictitious match from Tommy Rogers due to fictitious outside interference from Rico Federico, who has returned home after working the summer/fall in Eastern Canada, in the not-so-fictitious city of Orlando. Dean Malenko beat Superstar via count-out in a title defense, and they'll be working more bouts in the future. Also, Jumbo Barretta kept his Florida title, beating Federico via DQ, and Jerry Flynn and Firecat Brady Boone won the Suncoast Tag Team titles, beating Big Charlie Fields and Giant Outlaw. Sir Oliver Humperdinck promoted a show at Finky's nightclub in Daytona, Florida on November 24 before 90 fans as Coconut Kid beat Tex Salinger by a referee's decision after the two went to the time limit 3/4 star. AJ Watson beat Penelope Paradise 1/2 star. Tanaka beat Flynn to win the World Light Heavyweight title. Jimmy Backlund was announced as the champ but came out with his arm in a sling as he was injured 2 nights earlier working a WWF show against Skinner. 2 stars, Slater pinned Steve Collins 3/4 star, Sullivan pinned Lou Perez 1 1/2 star, and Bam Bam Bigelow, still recovering from knee surgery and nowhere near 100%, beat One Man Gang via DQ in the main event dud. Latest on Gordon Scozzari's AWF shows on December 14 in Asbury Park, New Jersey and December 15 at Rutgers University, Newark, New Jersey campus is that Steve Williams and Danny Spivey have pulled out of the show because of pressure from Herb Abrams, who is claiming to have both under contract. Latest lineups are December 14 in Asbury Park with Nikita Koloff, managed by Eddie Gilbert, versus Paul Orndorff, Norman Mike Shaw versus Kimala in an explosive match, The Sheik, Ed Farhat, and Sabu versus Ron Garvin and Stan Lane, managed by Jim Cornette, Gilbert and Pritchard versus Sonny Beach and Jeff Gaylord, Hercules Ayala versus TNT, Tim Horner and Jeff Jarrett versus Bob Orton, and Barry Horowitz and Dutch Mantell versus Mike Sharp. December 15 is Koloff versus Cheetah Kid, Ayala versus TNT, Garvin versus Orton, Gilbert versus Beach, Norman versus Adrian Street, and Lane versus Orndorff in first-round matches for the AWF title, plus Junkyard Dog and Pez Whatley versus Sheik and Sabu. Catch Fans International, a fan club in Germany, held its first convention on November 9 in Dortmund with 100 fans attending. Among the wrestlers who appeared at the convention were Rambo, Luke Perrier, Steve Wright, Owen Hart, Tony St. Clair, Franz Schumann, Larry Cameron, Joe Cruz, Daryl Peterson, Otto Wands, and Medusa Michelli. Virginia Wrestling Association drew 300 fans in Staunton, Virginia on November 15, headlined by the Cream Team, Dave Casanova aka Dave DeMelio and Rip Sawyer aka Sidney Garrison, keeping the VWA Tag Team titles, beating Jeff Collett and Stan Lane in 27 minutes with Jim Cornette at ringside in an excellent match. The funniest thing came after the match when Stan Lane was signing autographs and telling kids that whatever you do, make sure you always play by the rules. November 20 at Lassiter High School in Marietta, Georgia before 375 fans saw Festus beat Steve Lawler 1 star, Jimmy Powell double count out with Ronnie Gossett dud, R.D. Swain beat Night Stalker Brian Clark by a DQ when the PYTs interfered 1/2 star. Stalker still isn't good but Swain worked hard. Sugar Ray Lloyd and Steve Day beat PYTs. Lloyd, who has worked for Georgia All-Star and other indies, is the wrestling coach at the high school where the show was taking place, while Day is also a wrestling coach at the school but had never worked pro before but placed 4th in the 1978 World Games, won the Canada Cup, took 2 silver medals at the Greco-Roman World Meet, and was a member of the 1980 Olympic team when the U.S. boycotted. Dud Junkyard Dog and Ranger Ross beat Lane and Cornette in 12 minutes 1 star, almost all comedy, and Dog won a Battle Royal dud. No shows were the Wild Samoan Pez Whatley and Paul Orndorff. West Coast Championship Wrestling running shows every few weeks in British Columbia using Diamond Timothy Flowers, Olsen, Michelle Starr, and Buddy Wayne. December 3rd in Chilliwack, BC as FLAIR'S vs. Starr in a match where the losing wrestler or their valet gets their head shaved. Cody Boynes will be back on Wale in Providence, Rhode Island with a phone-in show from 8 to 10 p.m. every Sunday night starting December 1st. American Championship Wrestling drew a sellout $310 and $1,500 house on November 2nd in Aiken, South Carolina as Orndorff pinned Watley. All-Star Wrestling in East Tennessee has included champ Doug Vines, the Mongolian Stomper Archie Gouldy, Jimmy Golden the Sheik, George Weingeroff, Dutch Mantel Dante, Tommy Heggie, Jeff Sword and Billy Scott among others. Mid-South Wrestling on November 16th in Kosciuszko, Mississippi saw Ken Massey win the Mid-South tournament, beating Rude Dogg in the finals before 317 fans. WWF. The Savage angle where he was bit by the snake aired both in censored fashion in syndication and uncensored fashion on USA Cable on Sunday night. Supposedly there have been a lot of complaints about the uncensored version. As angles go, it was almost an ultimate hot shot angle. But doesn't it seem like they all are these days? But the camera work was astounding, with the kids crying and Elizabeth frantic. The kids and Elizabeth made the angle almost as much as all those close-ups of that ugly snake's face. Cable ratings remain poor, with Primetime on November 18th doing a 2.3 rating while All-American the day before did just a 2.0. Nasty Boys and Legion of Doom worked a match Thursday night on the Arsenio Hall show with Jake Roberts and Gene Okerlund doing commentary. The crowd didn't care for the segment. Although it reached a large number of people who usually don't watch wrestling and plug the pay-per-view, most feel the segment wasn't particularly strong because the crowd got into Nasty Boys more as faces than load, among those who cared. To help sell the angle, they pulled Savage from all weekend dates and replaced him with Sergeant Slaughter. In other words, where they originally false advertised Sid Justice in the main event after he was injured and replaced him with Savage, they were actually also false advertising Savage since they pulled him because of an angle that they had produced nearly 5 weeks earlier. That's interesting only because the false advertising of Justice on the November 24th show at the Miami Arena made a lot of newspaper reports throughout the state of Florida. November 22nd in Orlando drew 2,100, lowest crowd ever at the Orlando Arena. Chris Chavez pinned Kato 2 stars, Beverly Brothers beat Rockers 1 1/4 stars, Marty Jannetty had one of them pinned but Shawn Michaels reversed it causing his partner to lose. Skinner pinned Jimmy Richland, Jimmy Backlund guess you can't use the last name on a Titan show, in a match where Richland juiced hard way by reopening a cut from the night before from an indie match with Pat Tanaka and the agents weren't too happy about juice in a prelim match and he was scheduled to work a few more dates but was replaced by Hurricane Walker. Savage pinned Roberts 2 stars, Berserker pinned Chris Walker 1 star, Undertaker pinned Jim Duggan dud and Legion of Doom beat Natural Disasters via DQ dud. November 23rd in Tampa drew 2,500 as Chavez pinned Kato, Michaels pinned Blake Beverly, Mike Enos, Bo Beverly, Wayne Bloom pinned Jannetty, Skinner pinned Hurricane Walker, Load beat Disasters via DQ, Berserker pinned Chris Walker and Duggan and Slaughter beat Undertaker and Roberts. November 22nd at the Richfield Coliseum near Cleveland drew 10,000 fans and $142,000 as El Matador pinned Mustafa Horrible, Bulldog pinned Barbarian, Warlord pinned Valentine, DiBiase and IRS beat Bossman and Virgil, very good, Nasty Boys beat Bushwhackers, Hart pinned Mountie and Hogan beat Flair via countout in 12:15. The same crew on November 23rd in Evansville, Indiana drew an $80,000 house which has to be one of the biggest houses of all time in that city. Lawler and Company usually draw between $1,500 and $2,000 for their weekly shows in Evansville. Undertaker was a guest on Regis and Kathy Lee this past week. November 24th in West Palm Beach drew 1,500 as Chavez pinned Kato, Michaels pinned Blake Beverly, Bo Beverly pinned Jannetty, Load beat Disasters via DQ, Skinner beat Hurricane Walker, Berserker pinned Chris Walker and Slaughter and Duggan beat Undertaker and Roberts. November 16th in Allentown, Pennsylvania drew 2,000 as Chavez pinned Skinner, Bulldog drew IRS, Nasty Boys beat Bushwhackers. Nasty Boys originally cheered heavily since they're from Allentown but they turned the crowd, Hart pinned Barbarian, Bossman beat Undertaker via DQ. November 4th in Salt Lake City drew 3,000 as Jimmy Snuka pinned Big Bully Bizich dud, Bushwhackers beat Beverly Brothers via DQ 1 1/2 star, DiBiase beat Virgil via countout 1 1/2 star, Savage pinned Roberts 1 star, Undertaker pinned Duggan dud and Hart pinned Berserker dud. November 17th in Albany, New York drew 3,800 as Savage pinned Roberts, Hart pinned Barbarian, Beverly Brothers beat Bushwhackers, Chavez pinned Skinner, Bossman pinned IRS, Nasty Boys beat Rockers and Undertaker pinned Bulldog. First TV tapings of the new year will be January 7th in Daytona Beach and January 8th in Fort Myers, Florida. I believe they'll be taping a Coliseum video match with Flair vs. DiBiase in one of those cities. WCW. Nearly an ultimate disaster on Monday as Lex Luger quit the promotion as a protest because WCW fired Harley Race. The last word I heard is that everything has been worked out, although Luger did miss the November 25th television tapings in Macon, Georgia because it wasn't resolved in time. They taped syndication, and while I don't have results of all the matches, I do know that there were several matches that sounded like hot action matches regarding Ricky Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes, tag matches against both Terrence Taylor and Richard Morton and Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton, and a six-man with Brian Pillman as a partner against Anderson and Eaton and Larry Zbyszko with Pillman doing the job. They also ran some kind of an angle using Teddy Long, who kept trying to get Johnny B. Bad to listen to him but Bad wouldn't in a few prelim matches. Finally they had a tag match with Bad and PN News, who will become a regular team, which I guess guarantees Bad doesn't get over too much, aka threaten Dustin Rhodes' spot on the babyface totem pole, against Diamond Exchange, Dallas Page and Diamond Stud, which saw Long interfere causing Bad to get pinned. Strong lineups for the card's Christmas week: December 25th at the Omni in Atlanta, December 26th in Dallas at Reunion Arena, December 27th at the Meadowlands, and December 28th in Baltimore, with Luger vs. Rick Steiner for the title, Rick Rude vs. Sting for the U.S. title, Steamboat and Rhodes vs. Anderson and Eaton for the tag team titles, Pillman vs. Jushin Liger for the light heavyweight title, Steve Austin vs. Scott Steiner for the TV title, Cactus Jack and Abdullah the Butcher vs. El Gigante and Van Hammer, News vs. Taylor, Bad vs. Morton, Zank vs. Zbyszko, and Freebirds vs. Diamond Exchange. Most people seem to be crediting a lot of the positive changes in the company to the greater influence of Jim Crockett. Crockett has been saying things that make sense for the better part of the past 3 years, but nobody has been listening. And over the past few weeks they've been. In particular, Crockett has been pushing for putting more heat on the heels since the company has lacked heels with heat. Ticket sales were disastrous for the Tour of England, which is a surprise, since WWF drew so well there and turned so many away that one would think another wrestling group would at least do decent business. Bill Kazmaier is history. Wonder if anyone will miss him? WCW on November 16 drew a 3.2 rating, the largest rating of the year, while Power Hour that morning also set a record doing a 2.2. Main Event on November 17 did a 2.5. Sting and Rick Rude shot an angle where they had an impromptu match on television, ending with Sting having Rude in the Scorpion and all the heels hit the ring, but they couldn't get Sting off Rude for a long time and Rude had to be helped out of the ring. They had a dark match where Rude sold the knee Bad the entire match. Even though Liger will be in the country and be at Starrcade, he isn't scheduled to wrestle on the card. Rumor has it that the Great Muta will come in after the Tokyo Dome. Muta was apparently going to be Rhodes' secret partner for the Clash in the event that the Steamboat deal didn't come off. November 21st in Richmond drew 325 as Big Josh and Mike Graham beat Taylor and Morton, who split up after the match with Morton turning face in the building. Although it doesn't count as of yet, Bad pinned Rich, Medusa beat Bambi, really stiff match, Big Van Vader double count out with News, not good. Austin pinned Pillman after dangerously hit Pillman with the phone, Rude beat Sting via DQ, Enforcers beat Rhodes and Zank, Hammer pinned Jack after hitting him with the guitar, Scott Steiner pinned Mr. Hughes with the Frankensteiner, and Luger beat Rick Steiner via DQ when Rick hit Lex and Race with the title belt. November 23rd in Philadelphia drew 1,000 as Bad pinned Rich, Medusa beat Bambi, Cactus pinned Hammer, Cactus got the biggest babyface reaction on the entire card, Gibson and Josh beat Taylor and Morton, Scott Steiner pinned Hughes, Enforcers beat Rhodes and Zank, Austin pinned Pillman, Sting pinned Rude in a non-title match, and Luger pinned Rick Steiner after hitting him with a chair. Even though the crowd was small, I was told this was a really good live show with almost everyone working hard. TV tapings on November 20th at Center Stage in Atlanta drew 775 fans. First 2 hours of taping already aired this past Saturday night, which included Freebirds beating Young Pistols with Tracy Smothers suffering a legit knee injury, Josh and Zank and Arachnaman over Rich and Taylor and Morton as Taylor was pinned and walked out. Taylor isn't turning face, but the York Foundation is breaking up, and Steiners beat Luger and Hughes when Rick pinned Hughes with a bulldog off the top rope in a good match. This coming weekend's show includes Anderson and Eaton beating Patriots in a squash match since Patriots are being broken up. Pillman beat Cactus Jack when Hammer interfered and hit Pillman with the guitar. Austin pinned Arachnaman in a TV title match, disappointing considering who was involved, when dangerously hit Brad with the phone leading to the pin, and Rhodes and Steamboat beat Taylor and Morton. Taylor walked out during the match, and to make it fair, Rhodes walked out as well, leaving a Steamboat vs. Morton singles match. Then Rich came out to make it 2-on-1. Rhodes came back and he pinned Rich, but all the heels ran in on Steamboat and Rhodes after in what was reported a 3-star match. Apparently that wasn't good enough because they retaped the match in Macon on November 25th, which I believe is the match that will air this coming Saturday instead. The readers' pages. Jeff Bowdren of Plantation, Florida 33318 has a huge listing of wrestling tapes for trading purposes. For a copy of the list, send $3. JW Enterprises of Los Angeles, California 90066 has original 22 by 28 wrestling posters for cards at the Olympic Auditorium and Los Angeles Sports Arena from the 70s and 80s. Send in SACE for a free list and prices. West Coast Championship Wrestling from British Columbia has a 2-hour videotape for sale for $30 from Stuart Kemp, Port Moody, British Columbia V3H4H4 Canada. Pro Wrestling Spotlight Productions at Babylon, New York 11702 is selling 90-minute monthly audio tapes featuring highlights of a month's worth of radio shows. A sample copy is $6 with a 3-month subscription being $15. Jeff Gagliardo of San Jose, California 95123 is looking for a regular supplier of All Japan and New Japan shows and for tapes of the original Tiger Mask. David Mello of Eureka, California 95501 would like to trade his Calgary tapes from 1981-88 in exchange for tapes of UWA Wrestling on Imavision, Japanese tapes of the CBC coverage of the 1991 Grey Cup football game. Robert Sears of SE Rio Rancho, New Mexico 87124 is looking for NWA tapes from 1985 through 86 and World Class Championship Wrestling tapes from 1983-85. There was a plug a few months back for UU videotapes, and because of problems associated with orders, I'd suggest until these problems are cleared up that readers not order anything from UU. Greg Mader of Chicago, Illinois 60631 is looking for the address of Boris Malenko's gym, the Hart's Gym, Slammer's Gym, and for a supplier of wrestling masks and for tapes of Joel Goodhart's wrestling shows. Joel Horn of Brookfield, Illinois 60513 wants to trade his collection of old magazines for videotapes of the Paphos Old ICW, Old Southwest Championship Wrestling tapes and the episode of Primetime Wrestling filmed in Las Vegas. Alistair Potdevin of Osnabrück, Germany is looking for photos, pictures, clippings, and magazines articles regarding Davey Boy Smith. Andy Levy of Westminster, Maryland 21157 is looking for a tape of Halloween Havoc 91, Joel Goodhart shows and a tape of Magic Johnson's appearance on the November 8th Arsenio Hall show, and is also looking for someone in the area to travel to WrestleMania with. Bobby Yates of 1971D Lakeview Road, Asheboro, North Carolina 27203 is looking for promotional posters for Wrestle War 90, Bash 90 and 91, Super Brawl and Starrcade 91, and also a tape of the last episode of Dallas. John McAdam of Nashua, New Hampshire 03062 has a listing of more than 500 wrestling videos including old tapes of Mid-South, Mid-Atlantic Florida, Georgia and other territories. List is $2. Edward Tanza Jr. of Coram, New York 11727 is looking to find out if there are any wrestling schools near Plattsburgh, New York or Montreal. Robert Whitley Jr. of Lomita, California 90717 is looking for a video of Halloween Havoc. Bruce Genevin of Elkridge, Maryland 21227 is looking for someone who can get him tickets to Starrcade 91 and also looking for a regular supplier of Portland wrestling tapes. Kevin Witz of Baltimore, Maryland 21237 is looking for a regular supplier of New Japan, FMW and Japanese women tapes. George Moronville of Lexington, Kentucky 40508 is looking for a videotape of the National Geographic Explorer segment on Lucha Libre. Jeff Benson of Concord, California 94512 is looking for videos of Ric Flair arena matches against Hulk Hogan and the recent Family Feud shows with Kevin Sullivan's crew. Randy Hope of SE, Minneapolis, Minnesota 55414 is looking for a regular supplier of Memphis tapes. Rob Fudd of Columbus, Ohio 43223 is trying to find videotapes of Georgia Championship Wrestling from 1980-83 and also Mid-Atlantic tapes from the same time period. Michael Joy of Gloucester Heights, New Jersey 08030 has a list of videos. Clash of the Champions. Thumbs up. Everyone seemed to be putting out some effort, but most of the matches were still mediocre. 5 minutes just isn't enough for a feud match or a championship match, but at least most of the matches had some reason to be given airtime. Before the Rude vs. Sting match, Jim Ross talked about the U.S. title going back to the Roy Shire promotion, the San Francisco U.S. title that was mainly associated with Ray Stevens. Does the current title trace its lineage back to this belt? I thought the WCW US title came from the Mid-Atlantic belt held by Johnny Valentine in the mid-70s. Someone I was talking to from California remembers hearing that Crockett took over the belt from Shire, but I can't figure out when this would have happened since they both seem to have existed during the mid-70s. Gary Will. Waterloo, Ontario. DM There is no connection between the top singles belt called the US title when Roy Shire was promoting and the current US title in WCW. The WCW belt grew out of the U.S. title from the old Mid-Atlantic promotion, which started with Harley Race billed as champion and losing to the local headliner Johnny Valentine on July 3, 1975. The Shire title was started around 1961 when Shire started promoting in Northern California. The belt was either the same belt or designed to look like the belt that was the U.S. belt based out of Chicago in the 50s that Vern Gagne, Wilbur Snyder, Dick the Bruiser, etc. battled for. The Shire belt was the territory's top singles title until Shire's promotion went out of business about 20 years later. At long last, a WCW show that I can give a thumbs up to. The best match was easily Steamboat and Rhodes vs. Enforcers. The worst match was Z-Man vs. Stud, but on some of the previous WCW shows, this would have been in the middle of the pack. It was another show where Cactus Jack stood out. I was shocked at how good the Cactus vs. Van Hammer match was. The Lumberjack match was more complicated than it should have been in the sense they had Terry Taylor trip Tommy Rich, but without them making something of it, I'm sure most people forgot about it. Mark Schultz. Chicago, Illinois. Thumbs up. The Sting injury angle worked great, but since the next pay-per-view show doesn't have a match between Luger and Sting, the tension will dissipate before their February match. The problem with WCW is they don't seem to know that makes the difference between a clash and a pay-per-view. The Lethal Lottery is a great concept for a free clash. No titles on the line, so feuds can be started and faces can be put over cleanly. If it was on free television a week before Survivor Series, the concept would have satisfied some who were thinking of ordering Survivor Series. Instead, WCW comes off like they are copying WWF with a bunch of unknown matches that nobody cares about. The Clash, on the other hand, had some good action. A well-worked angle and with a better booked main event would have made a passable pay-per-view show. Jeff Cohen. Great Neck, New York. I thoroughly enjoyed the Clash. A definite thumbs up. Chip vs. Bobby Eaton was the worst match, but it was still 1/2 star. The Enforcers vs. Dustin Rhodes and Ricky Steamboat was easily the best of the show, a 3 3/4 stars match. Steamboat's debut was perfect and couldn't have been handled better. Well, okay, we could have done without the Dragon Head. The Sting angle was great booking, although the group grope with Medusa and Sting could have been toned down. Otherwise, the entire angle, Medusa's entrance, the ambulance, the graphics imposed during Eric Bischoff's updates and the Paul E. Dangerously contract interview, was as good as can be done. Have the Young Pistols turned on television yet? They sure acted like heels as lumberjacks. Did you catch PN News saying, "I'm not rapping" to Gary Capetta as Capetta attempted to hand him the house mic? Marcus Alexander Bagwell's interview was not good. For a pre-taped segment, this should have been a lot better. Van Hammer worked better than I've ever seen of him. Brian Pillman vs. Johnny B. Bad was the second best match of the night, and Bad should be a cinch for Rookie of the Year. Paul E. Dangerously did one of the better Ric Flair impersonations in the interview with Tony Schiavone. The world title match was 2 stars, but seemed anticlimactic. WCW firmly established itself as the number 2 group in North America, and this show was a great foundation to build upon. Scott Hudson. Atlanta, Georgia. Although the actual quality of the matches were only worth a thumbs in the middle, the Angels boosted it to a thumbs up. Best match and a candidate for Match of the Year was Steamboat and Rhodes vs. Enforcers. It just proves that Steamboat, after doing nothing in Titan, hasn't lost a thing. Luger vs. Steiner was very disappointing considering their television angle, being all of 2 minutes, had more action than their match. There were a lot of great bumps, but after seeing Jushin Liger give Chris Benoit the Frankensteiner, I sure know what the best move on the show was. What I didn't understand is why they didn't follow through with the Taylor Rich angle. They made something out of it, and never brought it up again during the rest of the show. The other thing I don't understand is why Missy Hyatt wanted to date Marcus Alexander Bagwell. After all, if he's supposed to be 21, that makes him a bit old for her. Evan Schlesinger. Great Neck, New York. Thumbs up for the Clash. The introduction of Ricky Steamboat was well done, and he certainly didn't look rusty after months in the WWF. Paul E.'s shoot interviews continue to be awesome. Arnold Anderson proved once again why he's one of the best tag team wrestlers in the world. The Jushin Liger clips were effective. Can Steve Austin ever win a match cleanly? It was a nice surprise to see Cactus Jack put over. Was it my imagination, or was the Van Hammer match actually decent? Using the controversy surrounding the tag team title match was a very cheap way to try and get 900 number calls. Does Marcus Alexander Bagwell have a prayer of getting over as a babyface to a largely male audience with a name like that? The Eric Bischoff via telephone from Savannah was priceless, whether or not they intended it to be funny. It's tough getting those telephones to work in Georgia, eh? Jeff Singer. Woodstock, Ontario. MSG attendance. Regarding the attendance problem at Madison Square Garden, I believe Titan is missing the boat of a few thousand ticket sales per show due to the Garden box office ticket policy. If you go to buy tickets at the Garden box office, there is a limit of 4 tickets per purchase. This limit was enforced for the October Flair vs. Piper show, and again for the November 30th Flair vs. Hogan show. This limitation makes no sense in the light that, with the exception of SummerSlam, the Garden hasn't sold out for wrestling in years. A 4-ticket limit means that families or groups of more than 4 friends are limited on attending, as it is a natural desire to want to sit together. A basic marketing principle is that it is easiest and most cost-efficient to motivate current users of a product to use more of it than convert a new customer. There are lost sales in not letting buyers obtain a 5th, 6th and 7th ticket. While you can get back online to buy an additional 4 tickets, as tickets are now computer-generated, it's almost impossible to obtain 4 additional seats near the first 4. The only way to get more than 4 tickets together for MSG shows are to call a contact at the Titan office and make the buy, or buy from a scalper the night of the show. The former is not within reach of the mainstream fan. The latter is expensive and inconvenient, since many people don't want to go to a show unless they've purchased their tickets in advance. The 4-ticket limit also has a secondary market effect. It limits businessmen who want to buy a group of seats together. The Garden Group sales department doesn't include wrestling. I've mentioned this issue to several Titan employees, who were surprised to hear about the problem. It should be easier to deal with and would be the first move that I would make before some of the more elaborate moves being discussed to pick up the attendance, changing the cards to weekend nights and cancel the Madison Square Garden network telecasts. The second move I'd make before considering switching dates and canceling the TV is to put together stronger undercards, like the Garden had once upon a time. Mike Omansky. Wyckoff, New Jersey. Television. The WWF and WCW's obsession with pretending that their weekly television shows are aired live has to be one of the most idiotic things in wrestling. First off, anyone who has ever been to a live television taping already knows the shows air weeks after they are taped. Second, if you have never been to a live taping, common sense would tell you the same thing. When was the last time anyone heard of a syndicated weekly television series which was broadcast live? At the beginning of the WWF syndicated shows, they announce where the card is coming from. The last several weeks of WWF Superstars of Wrestling has been announced as being from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Are the viewers supposed to believe that WWF takes everyone to Fort Wayne every Saturday morning for 3 straight weeks just to put together a single 1-hour-long broadcast? Besides, anyone that sees the WWF shows on the USA Network where they advertise the upcoming dates on tour knows that WWF wasn't in Fort Wayne the past few Saturdays. While Vince McMahon and Jim Herd don't have anyone convinced that their shows air live, they have succeeded in one thing: further exposing the business. Each week viewers get to see the spectacle of wrestlers holding belts they haven't won yet, sporting injuries they haven't received yet, or complaining about backstabbing partners who haven't turned on them yet. There was once a time when promoters wanted to convince the public that pro wrestling was real. Today, they practically advertise that it's fake, but are terrified that somehow the public might find out the television shows aren't live. If that isn't a classic example of what's wrong with wrestling today, I don't know what is. Tim Whitehead. Johnson City, Tennessee. Regarding the Earthquake vs. Bossman television matches in Utica and the Rockers squash matches in Fort Wayne, doesn't it put credibility at an all-time low when they actually film retakes in front of a live audience? How does Titan explain this stuff to the crowds? If the answer is they don't even bother to try and explain it, I won't be surprised. Peter Shandorf. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Wrestling history. Do you have any information on former Japanese woman wrestler Chio Obata, who I seem to remember beat Moolah for her title around 1974-75? Bert Torelli. Fair Lawn, New Jersey. DM, any mat historians out there have any knowledge of that? You've commented in the past that Ric Flair and Harley Race were both actually 8-time NWA World Champions, because of the title changes in Singapore and New Zealand that were never acknowledged in this country. I recall seeing Jack Veneno pin Flair in the middle of the ring in Santo Domingo several years ago. Well, on October 27th, they showed parts of the match on television and Veneno did pin Flair and win the world title, so when Flair regained it, that would make him at least a 9-time world champion. Louis Vyson. Santo Domingo,